Welcome to the Injury Law Pod, the podcast that explores and demystifies the complex world of personal injury law. Each week, Missouri personal injury attorney Eric Bartlett dives into the legal issues surrounding personal injury cases to help you understand your rights and options when seeking justice and compensation for personal injuries. So sit back, relax, and let's explore the world of personal injury law together.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Injury Law Pod. I am your host, Eric Bartlett, 28-year personal injury lawyer, and this is the podcast where we talk everything personal injury law related. And one key element of personal injury law is insurance. And so on today's episode, we're going to talk about a few different topics that very much relate to the personal injury law world and insurance. And we've got three things on tap. We're going to talk about auto insurance, rising rates for premiums, what that means, maybe what you can do in an effort to get better rates, protect yourself from uninsured drivers as people drop coverage. And we're going to also talk about a report recently issued by Consumer Reports, which demonstrates a lot of different car options for teenage drivers that are generally reasonable in price and have the highest safety ratings, and some surprises in that report. And then we're also going to talk about something else that plays into the overall increase in insurance for auto coverage, and that is vehicle theft, which is on the rise as well. So we've got the three topics today, all interrelated to some degree, certainly in the personal injury world. And so first up, let's talk about these rising auto insurance rates. So what we are seeing, according to the J.D. Power study, is that the average cost of auto insurance in the United States is up 22.2% year over year through March of this year. So that's a big jump, and it's creating hardship on people, because with the cost of everything else being high, people are struggling to put car insurance in place, which is such a necessary component to someone's life. If they own a car, if they're in a car, if they're out traveling on the roadways, insurance is critical. But unfortunately, when people are trying to make a decision between whether they're going to have food to eat or simply have transportation, or they're going to have a roof over their head, insurance sometimes is viewed as something that we're going to take the risk on not having and hope for the best. Unfortunately, hoping for the best does not work out generally very well. Seems like Murphy's Law, right? If it can go wrong, it will go wrong. Usually comes into play when somebody decides they're going to forego some type of insurance. Maybe somebody's going to not have health insurance, and sure enough, that's when some medical issue develops in their life, and now they've got a problem. And the same goes with auto insurance. Somebody decides, you know what, I'm not going to renew my insurance on my car because that's an expense that I can't handle, and I'm going to risk it. And that's generally when something bad happens. Or certainly at some point in the future, it's inevitable. As I've talked about before, if you're on the roadways, your statistics of being in an accident are against you, because the statistics show that everybody in their lifetime is probably going to be involved in at least 3 accidents. And so it's going to happen. You just have to assume if you regularly are driving or riding in a car, you're probably going to be in an accident. And so you just have to be prepared. So we have this issue where we have higher premiums, people are dropping coverage, and it's not good. So, what are some ways to combat this so that you don't go uninsured on your car? Well, number one, you should never, ever believe that loyalty to an insurance company is going to pay. So it's a weird world. Actually, though, not only in insurance, but generally everything, right? If you call your internet provider and tell them you want to cancel service, the next thing you know, you're into the retention department. And now all of a sudden, you're being offered a great deal that, of course, you were never going to be offered if you just continued on paying the monthly charge and didn't talk about canceling. I recently got Google Fiber. Google Fiber finally came to my neighborhood. Very excited about that. And of course, when I called Spectrum to cancel their service, the hard sell was on to try and get me to stay with Spectrum. And they were making great offers, things that I'd never heard about. But too late. Sorry, I'm with Google Fiber now. And it's the same, with your cellular providers, things like that. If you don't shop around and you just stay with that one company, over time, prices increase and you do not get rewarded for being a long-time customer. So with insurance, it's the same thing. And personally, I shop insurance about every 3 years because I want to know, is the price that I'm paying currently with this company competitive with what I can get out there with some other company? Because at the end of the day, I don't have any loyalty to insurance companies because I'm in the world that sees insurance companies don't have any loyalty to people. And so why would I continue to pay higher premiums with a company if when the rubber hits the road and I need them, they're probably not going to treat me very well anyway. And so as long as it's a reputable insurance company, I'm willing to have them as my insurance company. Again, if you listen to my podcast, I have no love for insurance companies. To me, they all suck. And what I want though is to have good coverage in place, but I don't want to overpay for it either. And so it's really important to shop around. And so if you've been with your insurance company for a long time, it might be worth checking it out, because if you're feeling the pinch of these rising premiums, there are other options. And there are certainly better options than just canceling your auto insurance altogether. And another thing you need to think about is this: with more and more people becoming uninsured on their cars, well, what happens, right, if you're involved in an accident with one of those uninsured people? Well, what if you don't have insurance now? And, somebody else has caused you property damage, injury, time missed from work, medical bills, all the things that go with that. And you don't have any way to recoup those losses because you chose not to have insurance. It's a terrible situation to be in. Of course, the law requires us, when we own a vehicle and we operate it on the roadways, to have insurance. So there's another factor here. You're running the risk of operating your vehicle illegally. It is a ticket. You're not going to go to jail. But again, as a responsible person, you should have insurance on your vehicle. And that way, also, if you cause somebody property damage and injury, there's money there to take care of that other person. So you've got to keep these things in mind when you're making decisions about how you're going to proceed with your auto insurance coverage, because it all is very important. And you've got to look at the overall picture. If you've got assets and things that are worth protecting, or you can't afford medical bills or lost income, then you've got to make sure you're protected in the event of an accident. So keep that in mind, because you've got to make sure, here's the thing: risky driving behaviors are up. Okay, we've got a lot of young drivers and not so young drivers that are driving around distracted. There's a report that shows risky driving behavior rises among younger demographics as distracted driving violations by Gen Z has increased 24% from 2022 and a staggering 66% in comparison to 2019. There's a lot of risky driving out on the roads. And again, all of this just leads to the conclusion that you run a high risk of being involved in an accident. And, part of this increasing insurance cost has to do with parts and labor shortages, the ability of insurance companies to get cheaper options when they are paying to repair vehicles. There's also just more claims out there. And so you've got to make sure that you're in a good position if something happens. So I really encourage you to go out, shop around, don't make the decision to be uninsured. And, again, when you are shopping for insurance, remember to look at the difference between what you're thinking you can afford and maybe the next level up. Because as you move up in levels of coverage, it gets cheaper. So the initial coverage may be X amount, but then to move up to double the coverage, it may be only a small percentage more. So just really look at how to get the best bang for your buck and don't go uninsured. It can really make a big difference. So let's talk more about teenage drivers. Again, they are at a higher risk of being involved in an accident, and that is potentially because of their own doing. Because no matter how many times you tell them, don't be on your phone when you're driving, it still happens. And it doesn't seem like we're going to win the battle. We can only hope for the best. We can continue to reiterate it. And because of this, because they're out on the roadways, obviously you want to put them in a safe vehicle. And a lot of people think that in order to put them in a safe vehicle, you got to pay a lot. It's going to only take a new vehicle to really make them safe out there on the roadways. Or a lot of people think that I've got to get them a big vehicle in order to protect them, a big SUV, right? They're going to be in this big vehicle, and that's going to create a safer environment for them if they're involved in an accident. Well, Consumer Reports recently put out a list of the most safe vehicles that are available for teenage drivers. And amazingly, so they go through both used and new vehicles. And what's amazing is that with the used vehicles, you can find vehicles that are considered high safety vehicles for around $6,000 used. And what they show is anywhere from $6,000 to about $19,000. There's a range of vehicles that get high safety marks in all the different impact types of collisions. So whether it's frontal, rear, side, diagonal, these vehicles have checked out high on the safety marks. And so you don't have to put your kid, number one, in an unsafe vehicle. Number two, in an overly expensive vehicle, thinking that this is what I've just got to do. I've got to get a car payment because in order to have my kid properly protected, they've got to be in a brand new vehicle. It doesn't have to happen. So we'll link the Consumer Reports report in our show here, in our show notes, so that you can follow that and check it out, especially as the kids are getting back, going to school, those types of things. This is a great time to be looking and seeing what your options are. Interestingly enough, there were two things to note out of that report. These big, large SUVs that I mentioned a minute ago, they're not on this list. And the reason for that is that the larger SUVs are on a truck chassis, a truck body. And these larger SUVs, simply with handling, are not the safest options for younger drivers. There are mid and smaller size SUVs on this list. So, if your kid needs some extra room, things like that, there's plenty of options. And then there's a lot of smaller cars as well. The other interesting part of this report is that there are no electric vehicles on this list. And that's because electric vehicles have too much power. Electric vehicles have high acceleration rates. And because of that, they are not considered a safe option for young drivers who may be heavy on the gas, even though gas isn't the right term. But you know what I mean, heavy on the pedal. So it's a great resource. Check it out. And don't feel like you either have to spend too much to properly protect your young driver, and don't feel like you can't properly protect your driver because you don't think you can afford the right car. And then finally, with all of this, and part of the reason why we've got increased insurance rates is vehicle theft. And, whether it's from the most violent type of carjacking, whether it's from simply breaking in to a car and stealing it, or, now criminals can steal your key fob signal from you. You get out of the car in the parking lot, you lock your door with your fob, and somebody may be sitting in a vehicle nearby and they can capture the signal. They can clone your key fob. And by the time you come back out of the store, your car is gone. And it is crazy to think that that can happen. But the cool thing is there's a really cheap option. And if you go out there and search, you can find it. It's a little pouch that you can put your fob in, and they cannot steal the key fob signals. And that can avoid this new element of theft that's coming out there. So just keep in mind as well that some of the top theft vehicles are the Kia and Hyundai vehicles. And you may have seen it in the news because they have faced a lot of backlash for not getting their vehicles fixed so that they're not so easily stolen. And they are in the top 6 of the top 10 spots for 2023 by the list of National Insurance Crime Bureau report they put out in 2023. And that is the Hyundai Elantra, the Hyundai Sonata, the Kia Optima have the top 3 spots. So just keep that in mind again if you're out there looking for cars until they get that sorted out. Those are not the best options if you're worried about getting your car stolen. So basic way to just prevent auto theft is obviously lock your car. Do not leave your keys in your car. Remove valuables so that it's not appealing if somebody's looking around to steal a car and they see things that are of interest in your car, and that leads them to even more so want to break into your car. And then, there's obviously anti-theft options you can put in place on your car. And again, none of this is crazy expensive. Obviously, there's a range, but there's certainly things that you may want to look into, which again plays into helping control insurance costs, which then helps more people have insurance on their vehicles. So it all ties back together in making sure that we're doing everything we can to control costs so that more people can afford insurance. And again, my final takeaway on all of this is make sure you have insurance on your car, because you want to make sure when something happens, and I didn't say if, I said when, because it's going to happen. You just have to assume it. You're properly protected and you don't end up in a very bad financial situation because of an accident. I hope you found this episode useful, informational. And as always, if you have an injury claim situation you're dealing with, we're always here. Free consultation. Feel free to reach out, and we'll be glad to see how we might be able to help you. Until next time, stay safe, stay well.